Are you looking for new books to read? Do you like finding a new special author? Are you tired of the same old books from the same old authors? Well then, welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where you can hear from fantastic new authors. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have worked hard to write great new books. Hear about their book and why you should check it out. So sit back and listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Hello and welcome to another fun episode of Discovered Wordsmith, and I'm very excited for this episode. It's a bit different this time. First of all, we've got Roland kicking things off, talking with him about author things again. And he and I always have a great discussion. He's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on. You've probably heard him on Sell More Book Show, and he's got his own fitness books that he's got out. I put a link to his website. So keep up with Roland, check him out. See what's going on. But he and I have a good talk about some author related issues that have come up in the news and around the industry. So it's always fun. And then I have a different interview than normal with Jacob Way from Deepwater Gaming. I ran into not Jacob, but Deepwater Gaming in conjunction with their comic book group with Oxeye Media. They've separated and Deepwater Gaming's on its own. But at the time, it was at a fan convention in Cleveland, and it was a booth that had independent games and comic books that the companies were selling and combining the two. So I was like, oh, I love that. I want to find out more. And Jacob and I have a great conversation talking about doing things authors can do besides the books, the games and the comics, and being creative in ways other than the books, which in this case involves games. Plus, we touch a little bit on kids and encouraging them for this type of thing, which is something I've talked about, that kids can make games now. Kids can write stories now. They can make comics, get together and draw and write comics. And when they get to be out of school, they've already got some experience. They understand it better rather than getting out of school and wondering, can I do this? They've already know they can. And I have another interview coming up of a 16-year-old that published his own book. So it is some very exciting stuff to listen to. And Jacob's very fun to talk to. We rambled for over an hour. So it's a great discussion. We keep going and going. So I hope everybody gets something out of it. It's only one episode this week rather than the two, because it is different and it's not focused on books. So enjoy. So let's see, what great topics and new things have you seen going on to talk about?
Gosh, there's so many things that have kind of come up and lately.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think that one of the best news, I guess, for authors is that we're finally seeing some more movement from Amazon in sort of making things right in the returns category.
Yes.
So, I don't know if this has ever affected you or authors that but in like people on TikTok have been sharing like almost how to use Amazon as a library, right?
Yes.
So you buy a book, read it, return it, buy the next book, read it, return it. And Amazon just kind of let it happen. And so they finally put up, and their rules have said that you can't do this, but they just didn't do anything to stop it.
Right.
Abusers will be banned, or we won't stand for abuse, but they didn't ever they just didn't look. It's just an automated system. So so the Authors Guild got involved, and they made, I'm never going to say the Authors Guild made a stink, but they stirred the pot a little bit and got some movement.
It was a little bit more weight than just some individual indie authors that sold 1,000 books.
Exactly.
Group, yeah.
Yeah. So there were, I think that some of those individual authors, that they banded together, there were petitions and things like that, and that probably spurred the Authors Guild to do something similar to how SIFWA, the sci-fi authors group, a couple of years ago, banded together to get Disney to start paying their creators when they were not, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, that was a big issue. Yeah.
yeah. So it starts with it just kind of goes to show that like there is benefit to, you might think that you're just one author and you can't do anything. And it's really hard as one author to do it. But if you get two and then you get a dozen, you get, it's like, yeah, Amazon still might not notice, but then maybe the Authors Guild will notice. And then the Authors Guild has, knows representatives there. And then maybe something can be done.
Right.
I think another part of it in this particular situation is that it was somebody probably in Amazon probably noticed, oh, these people on TikTok are showing people how to do this. Like, how embarrassing for them to just let this continue.
Right. It makes Apple look good and Kobo and everybody else,
Yeah. Like, oh, so it's like, it could be embarrassing. I believe it made a couple of big newspapers and stuff way back when, that this stuff was
Right.
happening. So eventually somebody at Apple, probably some executive probably said, is this true that, we do this and we're, people are showing how to cheat the system and we're just letting it happen? Yes. Oh, we'll stop that.
Right. And
so then,
sorry, the part that bothers me even the most, even more than a corporate doing something that's, in their favor or whatever, but it's the people that are doing this. It's like, wow, I love this author. I love this book, but I don't want to support it. But then they turn around and they'll complain that this book wasn't well written or it didn't keep my interest or something. It's like, well, you can't have both worlds, folks. You can't take this artistic endeavor that somebody spent hours and weeks and months and stuff to create and expect it for free and then expect the quality to be the same as, something that you paid 15, 20 bucks for. It doesn't, you got to support them and give them the love. And I know there are others that will definitely say, especially live author tables, they'll say, oh, your book's $15. Well, here's 20, keep the change for you. Or, they appreciate the author. Right. They know if the author is making money, they will continue to write something that entertains me. And books are such a good deal. Video games are a good deal that people don't realize. $60 for like 20 hours of enjoyment. That's a pretty good deal. But books can be, 10, 12 hours of enjoyment for $5-6 sometimes. So that's a pretty good deal that people don't realize.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's if you want to keep reading great books by your favorite authors, you have to find a way to support them. And it's not that much. It's not that expensive. And if I'm not going to preach the library thing because it's like people say, well, I can't always find the book in the library, but it's true, but you can request the books in the library. You can do your part to kind of get things going.
Right.
And, just do what you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easy to help them out. And the library thing, if you are interested in a book, I know the libraries Hoopla and Overdrive, I've had my book with no advertising get checked out of Hoopla and Overdrive. And it's like, great, somebody got the book, they read it. They didn't buy it from me, but they got to read it. And everybody's happy that way. It keeps the libraries going, keeps me going. And they got to read the book and they still didn't have to pay anything. This cheating the system. I remember clear back in the Commodore 64 days, I had a bunch of friends that they had a computer club. And basically it was, let's get together and copy each other's games so we don't have to pay for them. And it's like, well, you guys can't complain about having bad games if you're not paying for them and you don't support the people that are making them, because they'll be like, oh, well, we didn't make money. I guess we're not doing another one. I don't understand that concept.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. I guess, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what else you got, man?
Well, I think that the AI stuff continues to be in the news, and there was a couple of specific ones that went around. One where somebody made a graphic novel using AI art. He wrote the story, he or she, or they wrote the story, and they designed some basic artwork and then used AI to create the panels and everything. And it was copyrighted. It was able to, the Copyright Office approved it. And I don't have Grammarly in my brain. So I have to copywritten, right. And so it was approved, and then later on it was retracted. But I believe that will probably be overturned because I mean, the way it was done, I think it wasn't using anybody else's stuff, and the fact that it was like it's like they misread it. The Copyright Office so I think somebody complained, and they, sort of knee jerk pulled it back,
Yeah.
and said, "Well, we can't copyright something by an AI." And it's like, well, it's not by an AI. It's like I created it. I used AI tools just like I would use, something else. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that, like in that particular case, it was a good experiment, and I hope that goes through. But if you are an author and you're considering using AI, just be careful and ask yourself, like, is it worth it yet right now before things are settled? Because I think the biggest example is things are flip-flopping back and forth as far as AI artwork and AI stock photos, right? There's a big thing where I think Getty Images, they found the watermark in some of their things actually mixed in with AI stuff. So obviously that image was taken, quote unquote,
Right.
and merged in with, the AI algorithms to create this stuff. And so it's not just that it's learning from these images, it's actually taking pieces of it and, reformulating them and sticking them back in. And AI is not smart enough to take a watermark or
Right.
skip ones that don't have watermarks. So, like a lot of, and then, so I think the point here is that there's so many questions. And is it really like a book cover from a reputable designer using reputable non-AI art doesn't cost that much compared to the risk you're taking right now by using that? And
True.
the risk comes from a couple different directions. The risk is financial. Like, what if you are sued? Like, like if you're eventually it gets down to you, and like, like you're like, because even if you win, you lose, especially as a small business person, which an author is. If you get sued, it takes you time, money, energy, emotional energy to defend yourself, right? So the fact that you will one day win is almost irrelevant, right? It could ruin you, and then, yay, I won. And now you're in the poorhouse, right?
Right.
Or your spirit is broken, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is, like, there's been a big backlash sometimes, like when somebody even suspects that something was created with AI. So
Mhm.
I saw a thing where an artist created stuff from scratch. He showed examples of him making these pieces of art, and he put the pictures up somewhere, and he got banned. We don't accept AI art here. You're banned, right? And he's like, wait a minute, and he was banned. He couldn't even come in to defend himself,
Right. Yeah,
right?
that's a problem
Yeah,
in itself.
yeah. So I'm not saying that that's a direct example of what could happen to an author. But there is one where an author, a science fiction author, I don't remember his name, is a famous science fiction author, and his publisher used AI art in the creation of his like a book design. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, right? So the AI stock photo was used and then further manipulated by the cover designer to make like a pretty cool looking astronaut. And there's people that are not buying the book because of that. There are people that are sending him hate mail, even though he had nothing to do with it.
Right.
He's a traditionally published author. Like, somebody else made the cover. Like, he didn't choose it.
Oh yeah,
So
if he's traditional, that's the corporate, the company, the publishing house. He probably may not have even been able to approve or not approve. He
yeah,
may have
yeah,
said, "Well, I saw the cover on the shelf when you did, so what do I know?"
yeah. And
Maybe, I
like,
don't know.
and I think in this case, like, he said he approved it, right? But I don't know that he approved that it was made with AI. Like, he's like, here's the
Right.
cover. What do you think? Oh, it looks great.
Right. Exactly.
Right. I don't like, if somebody, like, I'm a traditionally published author, and when they showed me my cover, I didn't say, do you have like what are the sources of all of those images you use? That's the publisher's problem, right?
Right.
Like, it's not going to affect me. They're the ones that made it.
Right.
Yeah. So just be careful. weigh the cost, the dollar cost, the emotional cost, the energy cost, the time that you could lose by just choosing to go the AI route.
Right.
And when it comes to a cover, remember that the art is only one part of the cover. The cover does not, like, so just because you can now use AI art doesn't mean that you're a cover designer, right?
Right.
It just means that you can find the art that's quote unquote perfect for your book, right? And is that worth it? Because I've seen some cover I mean, some people are great cover designers. So whether they use AI art or non-AI art, it looks really good. But I've seen some other people that like, oh, now that their AI art exists, I'm going to make my own cover. And I'm like, well, it still looks crap. I mean, or it
Right.
doesn't fit with your genre. Like it doesn't
Right.
set the right expectations. So you're still not a cover designer just because you have AI art. It would be just like going on to Getty Images, finding the perfect image and saying, oh, because I found beautiful art, I can now make a cover. It's not true.
Right.
Not
And
true.
the AI thing is huge. The conference I was just at with work this week, there were several sessions. One talked about Chat GPT, and another one talked about the metaverse and new availability for business and all that. So, I mean, it's huge that these topics are coming up now in big conferences like this. And I've thought of doing the same thing with the AI art. My book, I wanted to do a comic book prequel, just 3-4 pages of the battle that's going on when the book starts. It's in media res. So what's happening before that? It was always my idea to do a comic book. And I thought, oh, AI art. But now the problem is, if I create something using AI art, but it's my character, my stories, would then using the art invalidate things, and if I tried to copyright it and cause problems because of the art, or would I have to put it out public domain? Well, now is my whole character and stories available for anybody? Not that everybody's clamoring to get my character and stories, but that's an issue, that you got to think about. If it was, J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter, and then suddenly they did buy it, and they're like, well, wait a second, you put everything out, now it's public domain, we can't do your story. Just think about that. We wouldn't have Harry Potter, so I see what you're saying with there's multiple issues people don't realize, but it's early and just beginning. So that's why everything's still in turmoil. 5 years, 10 years from now, things will have worked themselves out to some point, and it's not going away. So something's going to have to get figured out.
Yeah. And so if you do choose to do something, like I've seen, disclose it as well, right? So like there's AI audiobooks, AI narrated audiobooks, and on
that's big now too.
Yeah, so like on Google Play you can get them, and on Apple you can get them, and I think on Kobo you can get some of them. Sometimes I don't know how Kobo and Apple lists them as digital, but I really feel like you have to really set the right expectations that this is like what you're going to get,
Right.
So people don't, so it's just, you're not trying to mislead. It may sound great and people may be happy, but somebody's going to come along at some point and say, you tricked me into buying this book. I expected a human narrator and it was a robot. And
right.
One star.
Why didn't this book have more romance? Well, because it's a middle grade fantasy.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was a romance, 1 star. That's a whole nother problem to talk about.
Yeah. So I think on Google Play it says that it's digital, but but it's not. But I've also seen authors put it in the description in bigger, not bigger letters, but in like very specific at the top. So to make it very clear what people are getting out of it. Also, like if you're, like I've seen people do both, have a digital book, a digitally narrated book, and a traditionally narrated book with a human, and 2 different prices, and you have to differentiate one versus the other, just so people buy the right version, the version that they want.
Right. That I've thought about that, but the costs again, if I'm spending, let's say $1,500 to get a novella or something read and edited and out, that's a whole lot of books and audiobooks I've got to sell even to recoup my cost. And if, most authors are selling 1,000 or less of their book, you're not really recouping the cost. So that's where the digital is very appealing.
Yeah.
So I mean, personally, I see that as, oh yeah, I can understand doing that because I don't have a problem listening to it a lot of times, depending on how good it really is. It's
Hmm.
gotten better. And I can understand why people would do it just from a cost standpoint
Yeah.
for that. So that's another area. It's changing so quickly and so much. A year ago, it wasn't even an issue. And now we've got several places where you can do it. So
Yeah.
it's
I
nobody
think,
knows.
yeah, I think there are three, I'm going to say three areas. I'm thinking off the cuff here. Three areas where where I do recommend authors use AI or at least play around with it. One is with editing tools, pro writing aid, Grammarly,
Yes.
things like that, because it's just you're cleaning stuff up before you go to your editor, right? And that's big. That can save you some money because it makes the editor's job easier. Like, I don't think it's a perfect replacement for a human editor, but because it just doesn't always understand what you mean. Like,
Yes.
I see what you say, and that's incorrect. I'm like, no, that's not what I meant, though. So yeah,
I use
but
Pro Writing Aid, and it is a wonderful learning tool if you approach it with that mindset. That's a learning tool, not a replacement editor.
yeah,
Because I've learned, oh, this is why it's telling me to change this and why it makes my writing better. And then once I learn that and I write that way, I'm like, I can see that this sounds better than the way I would have written it before. And it's a great learning tool in that regard. Plus, it's a learning tool because it'll make suggestions and you're like, no, that does not work for what I'm writing here. And so it's a learning tool the other way where you can understand why you don't want to use a suggestion instead of just blindly, oh, I guess I'll do that. I
yeah,
love it
yeah,
for that aspect.
yeah. So that's one. The other one is for people who get like writer's block or stuck. There are some of these chat tools where you can sort of tell it where you are in your story, and it will like spit out some suggestions. And you can, I mean, the prose is not like you're not just going to copy and paste it in there, but you're going to read it and you're going to go, oh, that's an interesting way to go. And then like you can keep playing around with this. I mean, it's your ideas. It's like having a writing partner or
Yeah.
like somebody that you can sit like, I call my friend Kevin or I call my writing partner Galena, and I'll say like, here's my problem. Like, I'm stuck right here, right? Well, you can use some of these chat tools. They're getting better where you can do these things too. So like Galena didn't write my urban fantasy and Kevin didn't write my health and fitness, the anecdote, right? But they helped me get through it. And I think that's where these, I think it's chat. I don't know
Chat GPT.
Chat GPT. Yeah. I think that can help with that. So, and then the other one is also, I believe it's Chat GPT related, and that is with dictation. So it's starting to get, I don't know if you know Nick Thacker, but
Yep.
Nick Thacker is a fan of dictation. He's been dictating a while, and I've been taking his dictation advice for a long time. And a couple weeks ago, I saw somebody else posting about using Chat GPT to dictate. And he's like, I didn't know it could do that. So I sent him a link to it and he started playing around with it. And like he has a new course, a little sort of I don't know if it's a master class or a mini course, but it's like $35 on how to dictate. And it's a really good course. And I think he's just started to put some of that stuff in there too. So I think that's a good tool because used to be that dragon
Right.
naturally speaking is still like the king, the king, right? Or the queen. It is the best because it learns, right? So it learns rather than you having to change the way you dictate to make it better, to make it learn better, to make it better. It learns how you talk, how you dictate, and becomes better because you're teaching it. So, but it's limited. Only Windows and Mac if you have an older Mac,
Right.
right? And if you somehow manage to still have the software that you bought years ago on the Mac because they no longer sell it. So I think there's some promise here with this Chat GPT I don't know that it's going to learn, but AI is getting so much better at learning what you mean when you say something and, connecting all the dots. Well, it couldn't have possibly meant that. So let's figure out where it is and put the sentences together. So in this case, you're just telling it what you're just talking to it or transcribing into like a recorder and then feeding it in,
Right.
and it pops out the words and the words that you wrote. So I think that's a great use for it right there.
Yes. And I know Google has a tool. I've got it on my phone. I've got Dragon, and I didn't care for the tool they had on the phone. And then Google had one, and it does pretty good job translating. And with Google's, elephant weight behind them, gorilla weight, that they're not just going to let a new tool like that in the market sit. They're working on it. It's going to improve and get better if it's a way for them to, make money and bring in people and controls whatever market. So it's something definitely not to dismiss.
Yeah, I believe that, like all of these companies, Apple bought Nuance, which is why,
Right.
which is why you no longer have it on, the Apple version, because they brought Nuance to make their own text to speech better within their products.
Right.
And but Microsoft recently announced, that they're doing stuff with AI speech. And so I'm assuming that's going to start getting better in Microsoft products. Google has already been doing it. So that's going to start getting better now that these AI tools are behind the scenes. I think we're going to start to see bigger and better things. But the area where I like to dictate into a recorder and then feed it in. And right now that's there aren't that many tools that will do that as well, well as Dragon. So I'm interested to see how this GPT versions start. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to buy an older version of Dragon for the same reason, because it was easier, like when I'm driving, to use a recorder and pull the file in. Yep. Otter AI will also do that online.
Okay.
That's one to look at. You can pull files in, it translates them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Cool, man. All right. Anything else to add before I go out into the brave the cold wilds out there?
No, just stay safe. Don't slip on the ice.
Yeah.
And keep your ears warm.
Keep writing.
Yeah. All right.
Great. Thanks, Roland. I appreciate it. It's great talking to you again.
Nice talking to you. Take
Later.
care.
All right. We'll just get going and see where it leads us, discussion. And it sounds like a lot of fun. I was very excited for this. So
yeah, I'm excited as well.
All right. So today, interesting, exciting episode for my podcast and for my other brand line of work. I want to welcome Jacob Way to the podcast. He is the president of Deepwater Games. Jacob, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
And I must say, I'm very jealous of your hair. I saw the picture.
Yeah, the camera doesn't get it all.
No, it doesn't. It's very nice. My son has long hair. I got an author friend with long hair, and I used to have not as long, but longer. Very jealous of that. So, Jacob, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do, and that'll lead to the rest of the conversation. Because normally, anyone listening is hearing about a new author with a book they've not heard of before, and then we discuss some author stuff. This is like a little different, but I still think it's tied in. So, give everyone a rundown of who Jacob Way is.
I've been doing entrepreneurship for the last 10 years. I actually started as a print broker that brokered printing of comic books, board RPGs, all sorts of different types of books from Taiwan. And I started that when I was 23, 22. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I'd been doing that for a couple of years. And then I got into the board game space. So entrepreneurship has just been my path for the last 10 years. And now I run Deepwater Games, which is a board game company located in Saginaw, Michigan. If you're a Michiganite, or if you're familiar with the Midwest, we're right here.
Okay.
Detroit is about an hour and a half away, and we're kind of in the middle of this, not nearly in the middle of the state, but close to the middle of the state. And we make games that are approachable. We try and do games that fit in our mission statement. And when I say games, I talk about tabletop games. So one, it has to be a game that is easy to learn. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's devoid of strategy, but you should be able to learn it pretty quickly. Two, it is a theme or a story that is not just your traditional European castle story, right? We want to represent more than just the traditional story structure. And then 3, it has to be affordable. So almost all of our games are under $40, and most of them range in the $20 price. We had our most success when we first started. Our 4th or 3rd game, something like that, was Welcome to, which was so popular that Daniel Radcliffe talked about it on People magazine, which was
Nice.
just, yeah, crazy. Okay. Harry Potter himself is talking about one of our board games. And now we have a game called Monstrosity, which sounds like it's right up your alley, as it's about art and teaching and learning. And it's currently in all 1,800 Target stores, as well as 600 Barnes and Noble stores as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. I must say, I wish you hadn't said that, because I already bought 5 of your games, and I almost seem to collect games more than I should. I was just at my cousin's yesterday. We played 4 different games and taught them all new stuff. I'm like the game master.
Man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
We need more of you, my friend.
I love games. So here's where I thought it would be great to talk to you for the podcast for 2 reasons. We have authors that listen, and we have new authors I interview. And a lot of times we're talking about not just doing stories, but branding and other avenues that branding can take for other revenue streams, which comics and games is something that could connect to that.
Yep.
And I also do a lot with parents, educators for kids. And I think we're missing an opportunity teaching our kids entrepreneurship. And when they get older, they're like, there's no jobs. They're all taken away by the robots now that I can get. And I don't want to go to school and spend $300,000 and then get a $25,000 a year job, which is becoming much more feasible not to go to college. That's a whole nother discussion. So what you have done is a great path that is a choice that they have more than ever. I think it hasn't been since like the 50s that entrepreneurship and starting your own business has been such a solid choice for people starting out, moving on. And it's not like you have to, oh, I can never get a job somewhere. It could be part of, it could be the only thing, it could grow, and you've even changed. So I just want to jump in, dive in, have some questions. And if there's anything you think would be super relevant, throw it on out. Just a little discussion on it.
Oh, sure. Oh, one thing before we jump on, I completely forgot to mention, when we first met and talked, Deepwater Games is part of Oxeye Media.
Yes.
Oxeye Media is a conglomerate of different companies, including SourcePoint Press, which is a comic book publisher, probably the biggest in Michigan, if not the Midwest. And for about 18 months, I served as publisher for SourcePoint Press. I dealt with Diamond Comics and
yes,
Simon and Schuster, and we sponsored. We were the badge sponsors of New York Comic Con while I was publisher. I have a lot of comic experience as well, so we can jump into there.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And we won't talk about Diamond because we want to keep things upbeat and happy. I used to do a small magic store, buying and selling, trading magic cards, and dealt with Diamond. Now my son works at a store and deals with Diamond. So that's all we'll say about that.
Boy.
But your table was the whole reason I regretted taking a credit card to that show. I ended up with board games and comics. My son had helped me carry stuff out.
Fantastic.
These guys owe me. That was the deal. So let's look at the entrepreneurship first. So you're not as old as I am, and you've been doing this for about 10 years. You started young, about where my son's at now. Why did you choose to jump in and say, hey, I want to do games, which isn't like I'm opening a restaurant or starting an auto mechanic store. I want to do games and see if I can find people to play them. And I want to see about creating. Why did you decide to do that? And what were some of the struggles you had to overcome with that?
That's a great question. So I'll start with, since I was 5 years old, I've wanted to be an entrepreneur. I still can't spell the word, though. I'll tell you that.
I
At
can't
5
say it
years old and
usually.
today, there's like way too many R's and E's in there. It just makes no sense. But yeah, I've always been fascinated with business, and I think it's mostly my genetics. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. I never met him, unfortunately. The famous story about him is he had all of the franchise rights for Wendy's in Texas. Unfortunately, he sold those rights very early in the Wendy's history and did not really cash into that. But it's just been in my blood, blazing trails, right? And trying new things. And I actually did not start in board games. My first business was the print brokerage, and the focus actually was on comic books. And if we go back a little bit even farther, was starting businesses all throughout my childhood. My earliest known business that I can remember is I would cut limbs off of the trees of my grandma's trees, which she loved, and then I'd fasten them into weapons and sell it to the children in the neighborhood.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, it's
You should have followed that up with packs of Band-Aids. So after you sold the weapons,
yeah.
Missed opportunity.
At 8, I hadn't learned about vertical integration yet.
Okay.
I was a slow learner. And then I would sell Pokemon cards. I wish I had actually kept that business up. And then I played chess competitively for a little while. And then I was doing a chess coaching business when I was around 18 years old. So it's always been something that I've been experimenting with. And it's really interesting to me when you do see kids that have that spark, that want to do something, that know that business is like something they're passionate about, because it, just like art, it happens at a very young age, and fostering that is extremely important. My mom was a single mom, and she went to college while she was raising me, and my older brother, who's actually a writer, wrote on a couple of our comic books.
Nice.
Yeah, and she fostered that entrepreneurship. She encouraged it. She tried to connect me with different people that would show me the path of how to monetize that. She really didn't have that ambition herself, skip the generation. She at least recognized it in me and tried to foster that.
Love
The
that.
path of and the path of entrepreneurship is winding, right? You'll go one day, and I was actually a wedding photographer for a little bit. There's all sorts of different businesses that I thought this is the business that I was meant to be in. And in reality, it took a lot of those situations for me to realize what I really want to do. And to say board games is the end goal and the end of my journey, that's where I'm retiring, I would say is not true, but I have found what I like to do, and that is helping creators create. I'm not a creative person as far as writing, drawing goes, creative business wise, but I'm very good at talking to creators and finding a way to make what they have in their mind or have on paper and monetize it onto the market. I don't get bored by spreadsheets. I don't get bored by sales. A lot of those things that creators don't necessarily like to do. And that's where I found my niche, I guess, the best way to put it.
And I
But
think I'm sorry. I think that tagline, whoever I talked with at the table, that was what they said that kind of sparked me. Okay, if that's what their goal and mission goal is, then that's exactly what I want to talk with. And I love that, what your purpose is, exactly that.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about Axi Media too, is that they have a lot of people at that company that still there today that are there to help creators create. And there's a lot of creators there still to this day, right? A lot of the founders are writers and artists and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that having those businesses that failed, having those jobs that didn't necessarily work out, just take you on a path. And I think that one of the most important lessons I've learned in life is there is no such thing as a failure. It's just, or failure isn't a bad thing, really. You know, just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean that, it was supposed to work out. Doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It might just be that thing isn't meant for you. And there's a lesson still to be learned in there.
And looking at it from the author aspect, before even looking at it from a parents and kids aspect, from the author aspect, helping creators create, I think a lot of authors get so focused on, I've got to write. And yes, you do. The thing is, write your next book. That's the best marketing for your current book. Get a series and people buy series more and all that. But the numbers show that you got to have like the book, 20 books to 50K. You actually got to have 40, 50 books before you start seeing enough of a real world profit that you're making money. That's what the latest surveys, numbers, and all that show. And I think for me, it never was, I just want to be a writer and write, and that's all I want to do. It was always other things. I actually have created a couple of board games, which I should talk to you about off of this interview. But it was always more about the being creative and what I can do with that. And you mentioned something else for the entrepreneurship, that it's not, you're not stuck. Even if you have a job that someone hired you, they tell you, be here every day at this time for this long, we'll pay you this much. Here's the job functionality, then the stuff you do. You're stuck. You have to do it what they say, when they say it, how they say it. And you do that every single day. Whereas if you get an idea, you can go in another direction. You can add that idea on. And I had an argument with a guy during one of my talks once where he was like, oh, I'd never want my kids to do any of this because I want them to be guaranteed they get a paycheck. I was like, where the heck is that happening at? Because everybody'd love to know that. And the point was, if you enjoy what you're doing and you're creative, you can always find a way to bring the money in. And that's kind of the message I've tried to get out with some of my talks.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like there is no guarantees in life, right? There is no guarantee that job that you have currently is going to be stable. Building value is what entrepreneurship is really about. And even if you have to stray from that path, I've had times in my life where I've had to get a real job for a little bit, and I still bring those lessons I learned from entrepreneurship, how to build value into those companies.
Right. And the other thing I love about both comics and writing stories and board games too is, and some video games, is that those are all things that kids younger than 18 can start doing, can do right away. You even said you made weapons and sold them. I have a whole box inside of board games I created when I was a kid based on all my favorite movies, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, E.T. And I look at them now and a lot of them are really bad. But I got started. I got the skill. I got that spark and it built. And now I created a game that people actually played and enjoyed. And I'm working on another one. And same with the writing. Kids can write. They don't have to wait till they're 18 or out of college at 24. And okay, now I'm going to be a writer and write. Because if they have the same 10 to 15 year path that an adult would have, then let's start them when they're 13. That way, when they're 23, they're already going with full-time income as a professional, experienced already. That's my whole goal with kids is these are skills they can do younger. And by the time they're 18, 20, they're rolling and they know what they're doing.
Absolutely. The board games are about problem solving, right? That's the best way to look at it, is if you break it down into like its base equation, right? Is that you're putting problem on the table and you're trying to figure out what the solution is. And how do I make the most points in my turn? How do I know my opponent's plan? How do I beat them in that plan, right? So problem solving as a skill is something we learn very early. So really having a way, not just, hey, express yourself creatively, but also creating something just in general, right? Like creating a set of rules, creating a scenario, creating pieces, all of these skills that you're teaching your child doesn't necessarily mean that they're only applicable in the world of board games, right? Hey, I'm teaching my kid how to play a board game or make a board game. That's what practical applications does that have? But in reality, it has a lot of practical applications. When I was in high school, studied and played chess competitively, and that problem solving aspects go back to, I still use them today. Years later, I'm still using some of the things I learned in chess on a daily basis. I don't think you should, parents shouldn't think of the actions and the things that they teach their kids as a direct application, right? This should not be, if you teach your kid how to draw a comic or write a comic, that doesn't mean that they have to then become and take this 15-year path to become a comic book artist or writer. It's a skill that you're teaching them that they then can distill different knowledge in different ways. Oh, this is how I express myself. That is one of the most important things to learn as a kid, is how to express yourself, right? Who are you as a person?
Very true.
Yeah, and even today, when I analyzed artists for comic books and I analyzed artists for board games, I looked a lot at, has this person figured out their style? Is this an imitation of somebody else, or is this person's style? And it didn't really matter necessarily, okay, did they accurately represent swords correctly? Or did they get the reflection of the water correct? It's not about accuracy, it's about how you express yourself. And that's so much more important, I feel like, in life than just like learning, oh, okay, you're going to learn all of these elements of art and you're going to become an artist. No, just like that parent is really concerned about having that kid having the stable income, it should be way more important that that kid feels fulfilled in the stuff that they do in life.
Right.
We spend a majority of our waking time working. You're not going to get around it. Oh, unless you're born into money, right? But you're not going to get around this idea that you are spending most of your time working. And if you can find something that is enjoyable, like I feel like I found, that's much more important than the amount of money you earn doing that thing. As long as you can make a living, being happy is so much more important. Being fulfilled is so much more important. And
Agreed.
teaching your kids how to express themselves is the first step to that, in my mind.
Agreed. And if you know how to create, you know how to think logically, and
Yeah.
that you're never really stuck. I know people who get nervous that, oh, I think my job might disappear. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been out of a job for 3 weeks. And it's just like, so make the money. And as someone told me that, they're like, look, if you're an entrepreneur and you need money, then figure out how to make that money. And that's the end line. Does it always have to be writing the next book, writing a short story? No, it could be creating a board game, which authors, if you like, oh, maybe I'll just whip up a board game, really coming up with a concept and then good game mechanics is way harder than you would think. Even a simple game like I did took way more iterations to get it so it was playable. But then for kids also, the other thing that it teaches them, whether it's drawing or creating a D&D module even or something, is that one of the studies I mentioned in my talk is the rate of anxiety and depression in young people, meaning under the age of 30, has risen like 18% in the last 5-6 years. And
Yep.
part of that is they're being told, go find a job and get the gold watch after you retire. And that doesn't exist. So they get out into the world, they're like, and then they get a job that's horrible. And It's no wonder they're getting depressed and anxiety ridden. Whereas if they're at a young age shown, look, you can draw this picture, you can make art, you can create comics, you can make board games, you can write stories, you could figure out some online thing now for stores, t-shirts is big, that they, if they see that and it breaks through I have to get a job somewhere else, then they're empowered to go do that. And the world isn't as scary and life isn't as scary. And they realize their lifestyle, they can make choices. That's another part of my talk. If you have a job where you have to live in New York, well, yeah, you have to make a lot of money and you have to make sure you keep that job. But if you're doing that same job, but living here in Ohio, you don't have to earn quite as much money. So that takes some of the anxiety away. So that's the other big thing is it teaches kids, it empowers them, and it helps break through some of the scary adult life.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's something I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that are on their beginning of their journey, right? Is you have to figure out exactly how you define happiness, right? What is happy to you? Rarely is it a dollar amount.
Right.
Really is, oh, happiness is $100,000 every year. That's not true. That's not, like, I could be making $100,000 a year and be in Manhattan and feel like crap.
Right.
I could be making $100,000 a year and live in Ohio and feel much better because it's much more affordable, right? So
Exactly.
happiness, you have to figure out what that is. The other thing is that creating things, in my mind, one of the cool things about when you start creating things and realizing that you can create board games that people enjoy, you can create comic books that people want to read, is that everything around us has been made by a human, right? Everything around us, the computer that we're talking on, the webcam that is filming us, the coffee that I'm drinking, it's all made by humans. Like these things are made by people just like us, just the same flaws. And it's easy to be like, oh, Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein, these people were the unachievable levels of reality. But how many of those inventions are you using on a day-to-day basis? There's other things that are in your life that other people made that are much more realistic. And
Right.
I think realizing that you can have an impact on life itself is extremely important. The things that are built around you, the road that you drive on is built by somebody just like you.
And
That's
the
important to know.
improvements in the road material, somebody thought of that. Yeah, sure, some engineer probably went to school, learned new materials, and we're learning new manufacturing techniques. But somebody said, hey, let's use this hexagon carbonite factored material for a road. And how much better is that? And then that business sprang up. And I know some of the studies I've seen that the rate of single person employment jobs that they've started has gone up 20% since COVID started, 25% over
Oh yeah.
previous years instead of 2%, things like that. And there's endless opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. Our country was founded on small businesses,
Yeah.
and that's the backbone of our economy. People
Yes.
don't realize that. It's easy to think, oh wow, Walmart has 100,000 employees or something like that. That's not the majority employer. It's usually small businesses. You go drive down your street and see how many companies you pass that have less than 10 people that work for them. It's crazy to think.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. So what when you say you help creators create, what exactly do you do to accomplish that?
That's a great question. My role in most creation processes varies dramatically. So sometimes I'll be brought a product that is pretty well thought out as far as theme, as far as marketability, as far as concept, core mechanics of the game, vice versa with comics, right? There's a lot of the similar thoughts in comics, just different things like, is this story captivating? Are the characters relatable? What perspective are you telling the story from? I see a lot of writers don't really think about perspective. But in reality, most of the time you have to be like, who is telling the story? Where, what information do they know? What's still a mystery to them? So it depends on where the product is brought in on the process. So I'll give you an example. I have a game right now that we're working on. It'll be released at Gen Con of this year. And the concept, the mechanism of what you do in the game was very solid, very enjoyable, very approachable, created conversation. This is a party game, so those things are very important. But there was no theme and there was no hook. I went into the project thinking about those things. Okay, what is the theme? What is the hook? Where do we hit so that we can sell more units of this game? Because I know that the mechanism, the way that people play the game is very enjoyable. When I help creators create it, it's really dependent on the product and it's dependent on where they are with the product. But in the majority of the situations, my expertise lies in markets, understanding mass market, understanding hobby, understanding Amazon, convention sales. Those places, they look for certain things. They look for a game that's understandable by just looking at the cover. They look at the back of the box. Is the back of the box explain the game in 3 simple steps? Those things are difficult as a creator because you get wrapped into, this is the thing, and I know so much about this game, and like, how can I tell the story? I see this a lot with comics too, right? Is like, how can I tell the story of my comic book in a paragraph on the back of the book, right? How do I summarize 18 months of my writing into a single paragraph? And it's easy to get lost in the weeds and be too close to a project so that you can't easily summarize it to consumers, right? And that's why you need to find people that can help you with that, right? Either it's an editor, or it's a co-writer, or it's whatever you need in that situation. Sometimes it's just nice to have that outside fresh perspective. So that's where I see myself fitting in a lot of these situations, is assessing the marketability, the sales ability of the product, and expanding on it. And another thing in board games, it's not necessarily in comics or books, is expansions. How do you continue the product? How do you, I guess you'd look at it as sequels or storylines or different arcs for comics, but how do you continue the product so that it can continue staying on shelves? How can it keep fresh in the minds of the consumers? So that's kind of where I see myself helping creators the most.
So a lot like an editor, the creator came up with it and you help fine tune it from the outside perspective. And like a publisher, if someone's going more traditional route, we've got this product with the editor and the creator have created it, but now we need someone to help get it out there and put it out in the world. And as you've proven, you started a company that does all of that and you get everyone, but it's not saying that you could not say, I have this game and I want to put it out there. We have more avenues for that in today's world than ever before.
Absolutely.
So it's still, you can have that choice. If I like making games, but I don't necessarily want to spend all the time going to the cons and setting up tables and pushing it, then find somebody like you and make that agreement and everyone does what they do best. I've got 4 or 5 game ideas that if I sat and worked on them and really focused instead of just toying with it on weekends, I could have 5 games within a couple years. And it would make more sense for me to hook up with you to push that out. And that's the other thing I think parents with younger kids don't understand is it doesn't all have to fall on the shoulders of that kid. Any business they want to run doesn't have to be full-time, it could be part-time. And there are other companies out there. Fiverr is a great example as something that people can get work and do full-time work, but not have to necessarily do everything if they don't want to start from scratch. And I like that aspect of what you're doing with that. It sounds much more approachable than bigger name game companies.
Yeah, it depends on the way I always phrase it to those same people that are looking at self-publishing and looking at trying to start a business is like, what do you want to do, right? If you close your eyes and you said, okay, this is what I'd want to do in this creative process, and if I then have you open your eyes and say, okay, but how do you feel about tape? How do you feel about boxes? How do you feel about shipping rates? Those types of things that are like business BS, right? What is a purchase order? How do you acquire distribution deals? Those things that are like boring business things in the creative world are very important if you want to run your own business and self-publish. Now, if you define your success differently, right, and you just say, I just want people to read my book, I just want it to be out in the world, and maybe that success means I put it on Amazon Kindle. It doesn't have to be in bookstores. It doesn't have to be in Simon and Schuster or the He Who Must Not Be Named. Like, defining your success differently means that you can do different things and you can decide differently if you want a publisher or not. And self-publishing, like you said, has never been easier. Now, Amazon's making it a little bit more difficult, as Amazon wants to do, but still, you have so many different avenues for which to publish and promote your work. There's Zoop, there's Kickstarter, there's Indiegogo, there's all sorts of different avenues. And if you define your success as, I just want it to be out there and I want people to play my product and I want it to reach to people, then having a $5,000, $10,000 Kickstarter for your comic book is amazing. It allows you to do everything that you want to do. If you have higher ambitions for that product or you want to get there faster, some people bringing in a publisher in that situation is important. There's a lot of people that self-publish that are okay with where they're at, and there's a lot of people that self-publish that are trying to reach a different platform, right? Like a different size of their publishing. So yeah, I think it's really important to define success to yourself before you start that process. The other thing is, if you go through a publisher, it's a collaborative thing, right? I'm never going to sign a game that the designer doesn't want my input, because then what am I doing? Why am I publishing this, right? I'm never going to sign a design that I can't talk to the designer and say, okay, we think that adding this is going to help that. That's not a good collaborative relationship. And as a creator, you have to assess yourself as being able or not able to take that criticism or that collaboration. Because as you being a writer yourself, right, there is a lot of circumstances where writers aren't able to take constructive criticism or constructive collaboration. That's the job of the publisher, right? Like they are taking a large part of that risk in publishing your work. So you have to be ready to work with them to make a good product, right?
Yeah. So I know you don't do so much with the comics anymore, but I myself have thought of doing a small prequel comic for my current series. I know other authors out there have said, maybe I'll turn it into a comic or a graphic novel. And I've talked to a couple of people who just made a straight graphic novel instead of doing the book version. So what types of things do you look for? What advice would you give them to say, hey, these are the types of things you need to know about comics to get a story in there? Because you got books and you got movies, and comics are a little bit somewhere in between. It's got aspects of visual movie, but you got to keep that story because you can't hear anything and it's on a page. So what advice or whatever about that?
Sure. I think it goes back to that style aspect. There are a lot of comic creators, comic writers, comic artists that tried to emulate what they've seen before. And I think that's important to learn, right? I think it's important to study the masters, study how they did things. But the things that are getting attention and getting a lot of eyes are the things that are unique. Right behind me, I'm lucky enough to have a Matt Kint piece of art here. He's a big board games fan. I don't know if Matt Kint from Mind Management is his biggest
Okay, no,
piece.
I
And he
don't.
has
But
depth, and he's also got his own label at Dark Horse right now.
wow,
Yeah, and he's a huge board game fan as well. So that's how I got him to do me a little piece there.
beautiful.
The thing is, Matt Kint is so unique. His stuff is him, right? And I think that's really important, is finding your identity as a creator. And that's really difficult, though, I will say. It's much easier to be like, okay, I like the Avengers, I'm gonna write an Avenger type story. And I'm not saying that you can't write a good Avenger type story, but if you want to be a creator and you want to self-publish, or you want to get your stories out there and you don't want to work for the big two, then you have to find your brand and your identity. So that's first of all the most important thing. Finding people that can contribute to your piece of work and not just do exactly how you scripted the panels to look, I think is another very important part. The best pieces of comic book that were submitted to us had that feeling to it, right? That it's not necessarily just the writer dictating to the artist, this is what I want. It's more of, here's the story, here's the script, this is what I want people to say. I want you to take it and run with it. And that's super important, because as writers, it's easy to be like, okay, this is how I envision it. This is how it plays out in my mind. But in reality, like, a lot of times that doesn't look as good as you imagine it. And finding an artist that will your intention into visual piece is extremely important. And then finding an artist that complements the style of writing that you have is extremely important as well.
Yeah, great.
So those are the things that I think are important. I think the comic book industry itself is a very tumultuous, we'll say. I think that's probably the most conservative viewpoint I could put on it.
As PC as we can get.
Yep. Tumultuous is what we're going to go with. And if you define success in the comic book world as I need to make all my money back that I invested into this, and I need to be paid a fair hourly rate, it's going to be very difficult for you. I think you can find success in the comic book industry. And I think that I know a lot of people that have started in the comic book industry. Paul Jenkins is a friend of mine, and he started writing Marvel books and did a bunch of that stuff, and then moved over to video games and started writing for video games. There's a lot of career paths to make a lot of money writing, or when we say money, we really mean have a happy and successful life. But I think that ties really right back to that defining success and defining happiness in what you create.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people that have just spent tens of thousands of dollars on artists, and that's just a hobby of theirs. And it's just, they're creating comics because they want to create something. And that's their happiness, right? They don't necessarily need to make all that money back. And comics is just very difficult. Anytime you deal with a $4 product in a market that's probably 3 to 4 million people at the most, it's not an easy market to succeed in.
And like regular novels, books, it's not always one is go make your success. It's that series. It's the 20th book you may do. And sometimes you got to keep going if that's really what you love and appreciate. And I think the way things are in the world, with more people working from home, people getting used to Fiverr and all the online everything. And in Kindle, you can even publish independently, though it's very hidden and they don't do much with it. But the point is, you can do it a lot easier, cheaper than you could have even 5 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And people are more open to the things that are not the Marvel and DC superheroes. My son and I, he wants to do a podcast where each episode he picks a graphic novel that we discuss. And none of
Oh,
them
cool.
are the superheroes that you've heard of at all. The first one we're doing is Murder Falcon. And I have it right here on my desk. I'm halfway through
Oh,
it.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
that's the type of thing. More and more people are open to that. So you've got more of a chance, but just like you're probably not going to publish one book and make as much money as Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, you're not going to make one comic and become Spawn or Batman. And you're not going to make one game and have Monopoly that's played 100 years from now necessarily. Just
Oh,
couch your
absolutely.
expectations.
Yeah, just find what you really love about the thing that you're doing and try to do that more.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like for some people like me, it's selling more stuff. For other people, it's actually getting the products there and like creating a page and seeing that page finally in drawing form, and that's interesting to them.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money that just keep creating. And I think another important thing is push boundaries. Try new things for yourself. If you look at some of the most famous painters in the world and the ones that have museums after them, you'll see that they experimented. They tried different things. Van Gogh was not the same painter that he was at the end, right? Like when he started, it was very much he was doing life studies of people in a very realistic setting, and he moved as he went on into more post impressionist, right? And did a lot more work on colors and experimented and pushed the boundary, and he eventually found who he was as an artist. You know, those, just like my path in business, I had to try all of those different things to understand what I enjoy and what I like.
Mhm.
So in your creative world, in your creative career, you have to try different things.
And like you've said, what makes you happy, which I think is something the even younger generation than you is grasping more than the boomers and the Gen X's like me, that they want to do something that makes them happy. And that doesn't necessarily mean hitting that $200,000. It's something that makes me happy. If that means I don't own a big car, if that means I don't own a big house and I don't have lots of stuff inside that house, that makes me happy. And I think the younger generations are getting that a little bit more than us past generations have. And oh, I lost my thought what I was going to say. I'm sorry. But so when you were doing the comic books, what did you look for in the comics to say, yeah, I want to get that one out and published?
The biggest thing was definitely, is this person unique? Is their story unique? There's 1,000 stories of superheroes. How does this one about superheroes? We didn't really do much superheroes, but just to give you an example, how does this one story of a superhero hit me differently? One of my favorite books we ever published was a book called Darling. Brilliant book about drug addiction. Not kid friendly, unfortunately, but it was about this character who was going through a heroin addiction and how his life just was affected by heroin, but also how his mind interpreted the world around him while on heroin as well. And it's just a gorgeous book. I highly recommend it. And that's the type of stuff that, unfortunately, it's not always a commercial success, but it's just a story that needs to be told and a story that needs to go out there. Because one of the other brilliant things about this book is that it's based on reality. The author's brother died of a heroin overdose, and he found his brother's journals. And
Oh,
in these journals, he would talk about all of these things that happened to him. But in reality, none of these things happened to him. It's just his brain imagining these things
wow.
through
Wow.
the drug addiction. Yeah,
And
it's crazy. It's a crazy book. It's drawn in the style that's Miyazaki, but different.
wow.
It's just so weird.
And that's an example that can get out there and get told that would have never seen the light of day 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I know I had a friend in late 2000s, him and another friend were writing a book. They had 8 issues done. They did it all, had it all ready, but they got held up. Well, first of all, Marvel and DC weren't even interested, didn't even want to talk about it. Go
Mhm.
try and do it independently before all the self-publishing stuff. And Diamond basically said, no, not interested. So they were done. They had no avenue to do anything with what we have. They would have had a chance to get that out there now. And that's, I remember what I was going to say is what you were saying earlier. I think authors quite often forget this. Don't worry about writing this book because, oh, I want to make money and I have to make a lot of money. Worry more about, I want to write and my craft of writing, my storytelling abilities, and I'm just doing that. Okay, now I'll do the next one. And each one is something where you've learned, you've expanded, you've gone different. And pretty soon you'll have a lot of stuff behind you that you've written, and your craft, your writing will be where it is making lots of money. And the things that you already did don't need to be forgotten. You can bring those back in. The back order nowadays is crazy how much people buy stuff that came out years ago. That would have
Oh
never
yeah,
happened before too.
yeah. No, it's 100% true, right? Like it's you just got to keep creating. And some of the best writers that I know, just they just kept doing things, creating things, and then eventually it caught on, and eventually they either found their audience or they perfected their craft. And I think that's important. The other thing that I always was looking for is somebody that knew how to talk to me as a publisher as far as what we were publishing, right? So I'll give you an example. Like, don't pitch adult content to Marvel, right? Seems super simple, but that's the same idea goes to don't pitch horror books to Action Comics, or don't pitch kids friendly stuff to heavy metal, right? You have to figure out who's the publishers or who the publishers are that you are interested in publishing with, where your story fits in, and don't waste the time of the publishers that don't fit. This blanket email to everybody saying, oh, hey, I have this great book and it's going to really work with you. It's superheroes. We don't do superheroes. You can see a publisher's catalog and get a vibe of who they are pretty quickly. And if you're not doing the research, when you have a book to push to that publisher, they're less likely to be like, oh wow, you're sending us another pitch that doesn't fit, right? That's so important to really think about is who is the publisher that I want to work with? Who should I focus on talking to? Who should I try and craft a tailored pitch to this publisher and say, hey, this is this book. I think it will fit in really well because it fits within your horror genre and it's similar to this and this. That kind of stuff is way more important than the shotgun effect of here, let me pitch to every publisher I can find the email of.
Right. Agreed. And that's advice. I've seen the Facebook groups, authors get on there and they're like, hey, I just finished my first book. You should all go buy it. It's written for everybody and you'll all love it. And chirp, nobody answers. It's like, dude, this is a group for authors. We're all here for author advice. and your book is a fantasy. No one cares. We've got 20 other fantasy authors right here. And I'm being a little crass and cruel, but the point is, like you said,
No, you're
figure
correct.
it out where the best place is. Absolutely agreed.
I'll give you an experiment you can do at home.
Okay.
Go onto your TikTok if you have one and scroll through and try and find the most obscure video that's just made for you, right? Is it I have a red-haired husky, and there's not many red-haired huskies. But on TikTok, they know that, and they give me videos of red-haired huskies. And then go to that person's profile and see how many views that video has. And you would be surprised how niche of content you're going to get, and then how many people watch that niche of content, right? The world is massive, and you don't need a billion people to like your product to be successful, right? You only need several thousand, right? That's the reality of the world, right? Why waste your time trying to make the most commercial, like Disney products, right? Why are you trying to make the next Pixar movie when in reality you could be Guillermo del Toro, right? Not everybody likes Guillermo del Toro, right? Not everybody likes how bloody his stuff is, but he has a fan base, right? And you can even go drill down farther and farther. We worked with Adam Green. Adam Green's a great example. Hatchet. He made the horror movies Hatchet. And Holliston. We did the comic books for Holliston. And you would be surprised how many people are fans of this canceled TV show that only have 2 seasons. You know, like it's you don't need the world to love what you're doing. You just need to find who in the world loves what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Jacob, I've kept you for an hour. I was like, oh my gosh, it's already been an hour. Honestly, I didn't think it was,
Jeez. Yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah. I appreciate the talk. It's been great. I think you had tons of great advice for both authors to look at other revenue streams, and these are some things that can be done, and parents that it's a reality that this could be something your kids could do in the future, and they're not missing out on life or anything. Get it all together. Would you have any last words of advice for parents and kids or authors, or anything about your company, the games, the comics that you'd like people to know about? What's your website? Let everybody know about that too.
Sure. So our website is deepwatergaming.com. We're on TikTok, we're on Facebook, Twitter, all of Instagram, all the different places. We're actually doing a revamp of our website and everything pretty soon. Keep watching for that. As far as recommendations go, I definitely recommend Darling. I'm trying to think of some other ones that are just fantastic. There's also this other comic that we published. Oh my gosh, why can't it? Buzzard and Bone, which is Hatfield versus the McCoys meets Harry Potter. Crazy.
I remember seeing that one. I think I may have got that one. I've got a huge comic book stack that I have to get through that I'm way behind on. And then I do stuff
Buzzard
like,
and Bone is great.
Yeah, I think that was one of them I picked up because I can picture it. It rings a bell.
And then Matt Kent is fantastic too. Like I love reading and things from creators that have that style that they've nailed. And then as far as board games go, Boop right back here is made by one of my good friends. It's at Barnes & Noble stores. He also made Hughes and Cues, which is a great party game as well.
I played that one.
Yeah, Hughes and Cues is fantastic.
Like 2, 3 in the morning, being a little wasted with a bunch of friends, and we were laughing hysterically. And it's now we mention that game. Oh my God, don't mention that game again. Yeah, I played that one.
So he made this game Boop, which is basically, I'm a chess nerd, right? So it's just hit the right places for me. It's just like a strategy game where you try and move your cats onto this. Actually got a quilt in it. It's super cool. But besides that, I also, Wavelength is one of the games I always recommend for people. Very fun party game. It's about communication. And then our games, Monstrosity is one of our biggest hits. It's in Target and Barnes & Noble.
Nice.
But, my advice really is just you're going to learn a lot by just consuming content, right? I almost always have a podcast on, a YouTube video, a show on Netflix, and I just observe, right? Like you can observe and see, oh, why did they do this? Why did they tell the story like this? My fiance loves it when I'm interrupting and pausing the show and be like, that's why they set up this thing and this story and it's foreshadowing. But what the great thing about that is you're learning about story structure,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
I think that's one of the most important things. Even if your child isn't interested in creating or they are more shy about actually creating things, get them to consume, right? Get them to consume content. It's not a horrible thing that they're on YouTube. It's not a horrible thing that they're watching TV shows. It's not a horrible thing that they're playing video games.
I talk that exact same thing to parents. Yeah.
Yeah. They're learning about the way that storytelling is the reason that we have civilization, right? That is what has brought us together as oh my gosh, science term. That is what has brought us together as humans. Species. There we go. Species.
Okay.
This ability to tell stories and interact with each other. I think that's probably my biggest tip for parents. If they're worried about getting their kids to create stuff, get your kids to interact with creations. Bring them to museums. Let them play video games. Talk about those video games and story. I'm like, oh, what did you think about the story in this game? Oh, what did you think about the story in this comic book? That's super important. And for them to start analyzing those things and thinking about them more critically is important as well.
Great. If you like chess games, have you tried Hive? Have you played that one?
I haven't tried Hive. I've heard it's really good, but yeah, I haven't. I've tried to avoid. I'm really obsessed with party games right now,
Okay.
just because I find them fascinating. Because it's not designing fun is much more difficult than you can even imagine.
You ought to try a floor plan. I played that with a bunch of people. We got that.
Where is that one? I've got that on my desk here.
Yeah, I played that with my cousin and a group of people. And my son loves Gladius or Gladius.
Oh, yep.
It's
Gladius is
Gladius.
great.
It's
Yep.
one of his favorites now. And what was the other one we played? Oh, we got Sovereign Sky, but we haven't played that one yet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whoever was talking to me at your booth was like, this is special and it's a special packaging. And we got the expansion. And I'm like, you're just like just in my arm right there. But Hive,
I know. Trained them all.
Yeah. Hive is very good. It's very chess. Though my son and his friend said they figured it out how to basically make it a stalemate in the game.
Oh, interesting.
Every single time. And so they're like, so I bought the 3 additional pieces that they offered as expansions. And I'm like, here, this changes the game a lot.
There you go.
Yeah, good game.
I like abstracts because like that's where my background is. But abstracts are hard for consumers. Like they don't do super, super well. So it's hard for me I get excited about, we have this one game that's been in our queue of pitched games for a while. And it's just this beautiful 2-player abstract game that just plays very easy, but it's got a lot of depth and strategy in it. And I just can't do it because it's just not, or I can't pull the trigger on it because it's just not like in our realm of what our consumers are looking for. It's sad. I never actually, like, that's the dirty secret of when you get into the business world of a creative world, right? So like comic books, board games, you rarely get to actually do the thing that you're selling.
Right.
Much. I barely get to play board games outside of the prototypes that we have. I mostly watch people review and talk about board games. And I barely get to, at the time, I barely got to read books outside of the books that we published.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Have you played Isle of Cats?
I have. That is a brilliant game too. Yeah, that's super good.
Talking about esoteric, a little weird. My son loves it. Took me a bit to get into it. I'm like, what the heck is going on in this game?
I love polynomial games.
Okay.
Patchwork is one of my favorite.
Yes, I love that one
favorites.
too.
So
That's a good one.
It's about quilting too, so it's like really weird. Oh, what the heck?
Yeah,
But,
yeah, I love that one. Picked it up at my favorite game store is having a sale. Where's my credit card? Yeah, bad me. All right, Jacob, I appreciate you taking so much time. It's been really cool talking to you. I personally may be in touch because I do have a few ideas for a couple games.
Yeah.
I'm toying with the idea of using it as part of my writing business and attaching it somehow, or trying to put it out myself, or finding somebody to do it and which way I want to go. And
Sure.
So maybe we'll be in touch on that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, just in general, my email is jacob@deepwatergaming.com, and I don't mind that being out there because I may not always have a ton of time to chat over email, but when I find the time, I try and respond to everybody's email and talk to them about creation. I think it's important to have a bridge to understand like the business aspect just as much as you understand the writing aspect. So I'm always trying to answer questions about, okay, what is the industry like? What does it take to succeed in this industry? But also I love looking at people's creations and trying to give some feedback like, oh yeah, this is great. Oh, this needs some work here. But yeah.
Cool. Great.
No, I look forward to it.
Nice. All right, Jacob, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was great meeting you and chatting with you.
Great meeting you too. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Yep. Have a good day. And I'll let you know after we play Sovereign Skies and the others, what we thought of them.
Oh, perfect.
Floor
Only
plan,
good
we
stuff though.
Yeah. Gladius, loved it. Floor plan, I liked. It took us a bit to click with it. I got Sovereign Skies left. Oh, and Fantastic Factories.
Fantastic Factories is really good. It's a solid engine building game, very puzzly. I feel like that type of game, it's going to hit really well.
Oh, good. Maybe we'll have to move it up in the let's try this new game list. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Hi, if you enjoyed this episode of Discovered Wordsmiths, please support the author. Go to their website, go to Amazon, look them up, get the book. And if you click on the link that I have in the show notes, you'll also help support the podcast so I can keep the hosting and all the software I use and keep it running to help more authors. When I am recording this, we've got over 100 episodes, lots of authors. Go to the website, discoveredwordsmiths.com. Check it out. There's a lot of great authors, probably in some genre that you love. See what they have. Check out their books. That's what the point of the podcast is for. So people can discover new authors, find some new books they love, support the authors so they can continue writing. So please support them. And if you do like the podcast, if you've been thinking of podcasting or you're a writer, I've got some links also at the website. Click on those if you're interested in any of the software or services that I talk about. Everything that I have there is something I use. So I've got an affiliate link. Again, it's a little bit, if everyone clicked on those, if they were going to get it anyway, it helps keep the podcast going. So let's all help each other out and discover more authors to read.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.